Hello there, everybody. This is Allan Feldman of the Laguna Woods Democratic Club. Thank you for taking the time to watch us today, either on Village TV or on YouTube, and welcome to another segment of our program, Black in Laguna Woods. If you watched our last program, we were in the middle, maybe not even the middle, at the beginning of talking about the remarks of Dr. Thomas Parham. Dr. Parham was the speaker at the Laguna Woods Democratic Club for the month of July. And I'm really hoping that a lot of you who are watching this had an opportunity to watch his remarks to the club, either on YouTube or on Village TV, because he said an awful lot of thought-provoking things. And it wasn't just the things that he said, it was also the way that he said them, both entertaining and involving and mesmerizing. So we are going to pick up pretty much where we left off last month. We got caught in the middle. We ran out of time, so we're going to pick up that conversation. And we have two of the three people who were involved in that conversation last time are going to be with us again today. Dr. FRAN Williams, who is not here today due to literally technical problems, just could not get on the Zoom. But with us today is GLORIA Williams and Deborah David, two of the three people who were speaking about what Dr. Parham said last week. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Parham is the president of Cal State University at Dominguez Hills. He is a psychologist, and he is a longtime activist here down in Southern California. Hang on for a second. I'm so sorry, but it looks like Dr. FRAN Williams has been able to join us. I think she's going to come right up here. Yeah, she's coming. Okay, very good. There's Dr. FRAN. Okay, so Dr. FRAN Williams is here too. But as I said, Dr. Parham is the president of Cal State University, Dominguez Hills in Los Angeles. He's also a psychologist and a longtime activist down in this area of the country here in California. And I want to start something. I'm going to throw it out to Dr. FRAN, because Dr. FRAN, last time we spoke, Dr. FRAN was about to speak when we ran out of time, so we shall start this time. And I'm going to start with one of the I guess seemingly simpler, straight ahead things that Dr. Parham said, and that is racism is a white problem. Now I know that sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it's just a lot of ways you could take that. So Dr. FRAN, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask you to kick this off. What do you think Dr. Parham meant by that? What does it mean to you? And do you agree or disagree? How do you feel about it? Not agree or disagree, but how do you feel about what he said? So kick it off for us, Dr. FRAN.
Okay, starting with, I think in addition to what he said about racism being a problem for the white population, you have to start with what you see as racism. And a major part of that is power. Who has power? Who has power to impose anything on a subordinate group? Or who is empowered to make decisions that affect the lives of other people? When we look at society, and we're looking at American society, the people in power, the majority people in power are white people. So the racism is their problem because it is their creation. How they have used their power against or for or with other ethnic groups in the population. That would be the simplest way I would see that as being a white person's problem. So if you have the ability and you're holding the tools to make decisions affecting the lives of other people, then it's your responsibility how you use those tools and how the tools have been used to this point in our history has been in part to put other ethnic groups in subordinate situations.
Thank you, Dr. Fran. Deborah, let me move to you. What Dr. Fran said, and also what Dr. Parham said. What do you think? What do you think about that? And how do you take what he said?
Well, I
Totally
certainly
different.
agree with what Dr. France said, and I agree with Dr. Parham that he said whites need to clean up their own house, and it, even though it's a white problem in that way, it creates problems for marginalized people, for blacks, or for any marginalized group. If the people in power are creating problems for them. Also, I think it's important when white people try to conscientiously work on issues of racism, that they need to be in communication with the people they're trying to work with, to reach, because they need to know what works for them. They need to listen to the marginalized people and allow them to define their own narratives, their own reality. I think that's, so it's really not only white people's problem, but it has to start with that.
And how about you, Gloria Williams? What do you think? Do you think racism is a white person's problem, or a white problem more than a minority problem, more than a people of color problem?
I don't know if I want to give weight to it, like an either or who holds the most weight. I agree with Dr. Fran about the power, and certainly agree with Deborah about, as a Black person, I see it as a problem. I thought I would just try to find out what the word problem means to me. And I thought of several different things. So I decided I would look it up. And the experts say that a problem is something that's a situation that's regarded as unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with and overcome. And I think both groups can see racism fitting into that definition of a problem, or that definition, being what racism really is. It is certainly an unwelcome situation put up on the marginalized group by those in power, harmful. It has been harmful physically, emotionally, economically, all those kinds of negatives you can think of to Black people. And it certainly needs to be dealt with. And the next thing would be, how will it be overcome? We as Black people have been singing for many years now, since the Civil Rights Movement, that we shall overcome. I don't know when or how we'll overcome until the other group realizes that they have the power to do something about this problem. We have a responsibility as a group to, I think, take up the mantle and run with it, and maybe not. So many people have been dealing with the past. We can't forget it, but we do have to stop carrying it, I think, as a burden that would weigh us down. But it's a problem that both groups, I think, need to recognize as belonging to both of us. Although Blacks, African Americans had it placed upon us, it's here. And I think we have to work to try and do something about it.
Right. I don't usually inject myself, I usually push it on, but I was just thinking of something as all of you were talking about how racism cuts both ways to me. And I don't mean to cheapen this with a baseball analogy, but I'm going to anyway. When I was a young child, I go with my father, and my father was a big baseball fan. I'm a big baseball fan. And he'd talk about seeing all these great players that he saw: Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Ted Williams, all these great players. But he never talked because he never saw Satchel Paige. He never saw Josh Gibson. He never saw Cool Papa Bell. He never saw these great players who played in what was called the Negro Leagues at the time. And that's something, that's white persons doing, that those people didn't get an opportunity. But it also it prevented my father, the things that they could bring, he didn't know about. He didn't see. It wasn't available to him. So it's really, we're talking about baseball, not real life here. It was maybe a microcosm, but it's cutting both ways. I mean, it's cutting off what I could see, my full view of what baseball is. But for people like Josh Gish and Satchel Paige, it cut off all this opportunity. It cut off a chance to make money economically. So I think these play out in almost every aspect of life. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Usually I don't stick it in there, but I just thought of it, so I figured I'd let go of the brainstorm. Pardon me, I apologize. Deborah, I'm going to go to you for the next one. I'm going to pick up on something that Dr. FRAN said and ask you what your thoughts are on this. And one of the things that Dr. Parham said also, he said, not only say racism is white problem, but he said racism to him, one of the essences of racism is the power to define reality. Mm-hmm. I'm taking my reality and I'm putting it on somebody else. So what do you think of that? Just what's your comments on that?
Oh, first of all, I agree entirely. That's one of the things that as a sociologist we learn, that things that are defined as real are real in their consequences. And people who define reality, I mean, we can see this with many of the Republicans right now who are trying to define reality in ways that don't jibe with my understanding of reality, but they're able to get other people to buy into it, and which is scary to me. So yes, I think that the power to define reality is critical, and we need to empower each other to narrate each other's, our own reality, and to tell our own stories, and to advocate for each other to tell their own stories.
And Dr. FRAN, you brought it up at the beginning, but I'm just interested in your further thoughts on that, because we do see this all the time. We see it in big things and we see it in small things. We see as soon as a young black man is killed by the police, right away we know all about every time he was suspended from school. We see the pictures of him making alleged gang signs and all that, kind of a dehumanization. Is that the power to define, or is that an attempt to define people?
Before I respond to that, I want to make all of us aware. We're talking about Dr. Parham's statement and my statement. Remember, you've used two terms that were not included in the statements from either of us. And one is more, that racism is more the white person's problem. More was not used, and only for a white person, only was not used. We're talking about, and in Parham's statement, he used neither of those terms. So I don't want us to, like the old game, you say something to one person, you whisper it to another, and by the time you get to the 10th, it's been misconstrued with words added or deleted to that statement. I don't want us to be guilty of that. So we need to take the more and the only out of that when we're talking about what he said or what I said. In terms of your statement and your question about realities, realize too that with the civil rights movement, today's movement, we have included a new phrase, and it is my reality. So what is real for you may not be what is real for someone else. And as Deborah said, the reality is based pretty much on the consequences or the experience itself. and where one group might experience one set of actions and reactions, another group is experiencing something totally different for the same activity or with the same activity. So we're looking at power and we're talking about who has it, who wields it, how we respond to it. I think in Gloria's offering the definition, we can take each of those terms and look at what has happened with us socially, what has happened to us as a group, and find that we come up with all kinds of different manifestations of power. I think one of the things that we need to do, as Deborah mentioned, is increase and improve. And I think we're trying to do that with this very show. Increase and improve the communication between the groups. I'm a firm believer that people, whoever they are and whatever their color, are fundamentally good for the most part. And the things that they do are not designed to inflict hurt, harm, limitations on other groups. That I think the result of not communicating, the result of not bothering to know and to understand and to find out the needs of each other, we come away with this separation, misunderstanding, and going in so many different directions that end up being harmful for the lesser group, and for the most part.
Thank you. I want to move to. I wanted to get into this. I gotta break it down. It's too big for me to comprehend in one thing. I don't even know if we'll have time to get through all of it today. But one of the things that he said, one of the things he was talking about when he was talking about racism, is that I'm not sure. Gloria, I'm going to ask you first on this. I'm not sure whom he was talking to, but he said if racism makes you an alien to the culture, makes people aliens to their culture, victims of racism, or maybe, I'm not sure who he meant. If he meant the victims of racism or if he meant the perpetrators of racism. So Gloria Williams, what do you take from that sentence? Alien, the people who are racism makes you an alien to your own culture.
I really think he was talking to both groups, Allan. And I base my belief on what he talked about, and I don't want to misquote him, but whether we are going to be, drum majors, or if we're just going to, sit on the sidelines and actually let the world march by. I may be wrong, but it just seemed to me that he was saying to us Black Americans that we have a responsibility in this. Those in power, who have the most power, more power. Now, right there, Dr. FRAN.
Yeah.
That word, more power, can do even more. I don't think that he really singled out either group to address his words to. There were some that probably hit home harder to some than others, because I dare say that we can't really see the world the same way out of our different eyes. My experience has been totally different from yours. Allan, you and I talked about that once, about our concern about our sons, and I will go into all of that. But it's just a totally different perspective that I have, simply because I'm a Black woman, a Black mother, and have lived in a Black world. And I say that because our worlds have been different. Not that's a bad thing in terms of us caring about our culture, but it's just certainly totally been different. So I really think Dr. Parham was speaking to both groups.
I agree, and I actually, when I listening to his talk again, it's obvious that most of the things he is saying is to everybody, not just
Right.
to one person. So Deborah,
Allan, may I just quickly add,
sure, I'm sorry.
he made the point about our obligation to educate, to teach, and he spoke of his students, his needy students at Dominguez Hills. That I'm sure was talking to everybody, because there are those of us in this group who can do more in terms of pulling our Black kids up, helping them, recognizing their problems, and not sitting on our laurels, because we've all stood on somebody's shoulders to get where we are. So I really think we have to look at it, both through my eyes and yours.
Yes.
I wanted to comment a little bit more on the idea of being aliens to their own culture. The context in which he talked about this, he quoted someone, and I don't know exactly who it was, so forgive me, that there's something wrong with an educational system and the world if it leaves people strangers to themselves, aliens to their culture, oblivious to their condition, and inhuman to their oppressors. So it was in the context of education, and he was talking about how critical education is to deal with these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's okay, I'd like to get into education for a minute here, because after all, Dr. Parham is the president of Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. So education is obviously important to him. And if I may start we'll start with GLORIA this time. Just a really elemental question, which I don't know, literally do not know the answer to. And it wasn't necessarily something Dr. Parham talked about, but when you're a student of color, a student of color, how important is it to have people who are in your school in an authority position, people who can help you, people who you can go to with your problems? How important is it to have people who are like you in those positions? People who are, if you're, I picture myself as a 16-year-old Black kid in high school, floundering all over the place. How important would it be to have a person like Dr. Parham or Dr. Williams or you who could understand my culture and my background? How important do you think that is to people's education? GLORIA,
I think it's very important, but I don't want to say it's so important to the point of excluding somebody who doesn't look like me. Because I think a part of this has to do with, if a person is in that position, and I'll just say, if I had a white counselor, and I had this experience with my children, a white counselor who looked at my educational background and my husband's and decided that my son needed to go to an Ivy League school. We knew better. We knew this young man, and our decision, and it was a good decision, was to send him to an HBCU, historically Black college, for many social reasons. He was a pretty good student, but could do a lot better. And he just felt that he needed to be in that setting, although he was going to an interracial high school. So I guess my answer would be, Allan, that certainly someone who has, in whose shoes I might now be walking, and I'm speaking from the point of view of a student, might have a better understanding, but that does not exclude a person who has not been that person. What we did with that situation I mentioned was my husband researched some catalogs and had this counselor to look at catalogs from some of the historically Black colleges. And this person appreciated that, because she did not have a real good handle on what was available, to Black students who would choose that route. So I think it behooves people in both cultures, or whatever cultures, to be willing to learn something. Also, I can look at it now differently than I would have as a student, because now I do not put a lot of blame on a person who was not exposed to learning anything about the Black culture, person of another racial group who, if it was not something like you said about your dad, if it was not presented, then how can I really blame him? But as an adult, he has this opportunity now, and most especially if he is working in a situation where he's helping to mold the lives of whatever racial group he's working with. It behooves him to, it is a responsibility to learn something about that person so that you can truthfully empathize. I mean, you can talk the game, but until you really put your heart into it and are willing to look up and realize that you don't really know some of these things and be willing to learn them, I think you're not really doing your job.
I agree. Educate the educated.
Allan, if I may, I'd
Yes.
like to say something to that in reference to both the African American students and the Hispanic students, and also to my experience. Since I grew up in the South and I attended segregated schools, I was also of an age to attend the first integrated university, that's LSU, as a 16-year-old starting college, and had the experience of counselors from both ethnic groups. The Black counselors, of course, while I was in the Black school, mind you, it was a special school, college preparatory school, and one of the few in the South for African Americans. Having somebody who looked like you was very important, very encouraging, and it was spending a lifetime of having modeled for me people who looked like me and encouraged me to do. A part of that was preparing me in a global sense, and it was something that I transferred to my own kids, where they are Southern California kids who had teachers and individuals who worked with them from a global perspective and encouraging them to do, to perform, to engage in activities that were global rather than confined to ethnicity. And this is where I see the importance coming from, not the ethnicity of the counselors or the individuals who are working with them and serving them, but to the consciousness of those counselors, whatever their ethnic group. And I found that also with my students and with my Hispanic students. I taught some of the first classes in multicultural education. And as a part of that, a spinoff of that, I still have contacts with many of my Hispanic students who learned about their own culture from somebody who did not look like them, only because of my conscious insistence on teaching them more about them. So I look more to where the teachers are rather than what they are, and where their concern and their preparation of their students comes from.
Well, Dr. FRAN, you got the last word this week.
Well, good for me.
Deborah, you're the one frozen out this week.
Well,
Sorry.
and I had an experience I was going to talk about, but we'll
I'm
have
sorry.
to do that offline.
I'm sorry. We are.
That's okay.
I mean, I think we might be off the air when minutes now. I just want to do a quick goodbye because we've got 10 seconds left. I want to thank you all. This is, really, really great. It's just wonderful hearing from you all. You all add so much to the conversation. I'm so happy that you could all come back and do this a second time. Like I said, we could do this for the next 6 months and not get halfway through what Dr. Parham had to say. So thank you all once again, and thank you for everybody watching, and we'll see you again about another month. Thank you. Have a good day.